Welcome to Days of Roar, a Detroit Tiger podcast brought to you by the Detroit Free Press. My name is Mark Gorash. I'm here with Free Press beat writer Evan Petzold after 2 days of baseball, which is a lot better than no days with baseball. Evan Petzold, how you surviving Lakeland? You've been down there for a very, very long time.
I'm enjoying it. Spring training, already 2 weeks in the books. Pitchers and catchers, check. Full squad workout, check. The first game, check. That was Saturday against the Philadelphia Phillies. And now we're 31 days away from opening day against the Dodgers in Los Angeles. Everything has been great down here in Lakeland, Florida. Really happy that Grapefruit League games are underway. One of my biggest takeaways from this past week, it was getting our first look at Jackson Job's curveball in live batting practice. Remember, Jackson Job came on this podcast, Days of Roar, and unveiled he was adding the curveball and the sinker to his pitch mix in 2025. And now we've seen the curveball in spring training competition against hitters, Ryan Kreidler, Jace Jung, Trey Sweeney, and Wenzel Perez in a live batting practice session. It's really good. And it's going to be his primary swing and miss pitch aside from the changeup. Essentially, the curveball replaces the sweeper. He's going to throw both pitches, but the curveball replaces the sweeper as that swing and miss pitch. The sweeper was the big slider that was super famous when Jackson Job got drafted, but it wasn't missing enough bats. And last season, hitters just stopped swinging at it. In 2024, Job ranked in the 90th percentile for reaching 2 strikes among minor league pitchers, but he ranked in the 13th percentile in called strike plus whiff rate in 2-strike counts. So what that means is he was able to get to 2 strikes, but he really struggled to get strikeouts. So he went back to the drawing board. He wants to get strikeouts in 2-strike counts, and he comes up with this curveball, and it's really nasty. When you look at what his attack plan is now, it's, 4-seam fastball. It moves up to both-handed hitters. The curveball moves down to both-handed hitters. The cutter and sweeper move glove side away from right-handed hitters, and the changeup and sinker move arm side away from left-handed hitters. So he can attack in all quadrants of the strike zone against both-handed hitters, north, south, east, west. He's got it all. The curveball is a true curveball. It looks like a fastball coming out of his hand, then it falls off the table. The fastball averaged 98 miles an hour in the live batting practice session. Hitters were completely fooled by the curveball playing off of it. What impressed me even more, though, was Jackson Job threw 4 balls in a row to start his 25-pitch live BP session, and then he threw 17 of 21 pitches for strikes to complete the session. So that's the type of strike throwing we need to see from Jackson Job. If he is filling up the strike zone, considering the shapes of his pitches and the movement of those pitches, hitters will not be able to hit him. If he nibbles and tries to get swing and misses outside of the strike zone, then he's going to get in trouble with the walks. He just needs to attack. So to me, it was very impressive that he made that adjustment after throwing 4 balls in a row, bouncing back with 17 of 21 pitches for strikes. It was really impressive, and the curveball was dominant. We're going to see Jackson Job on display Tuesday against the Baltimore Orioles in Sarasota. I cannot wait to watch him pitch. It's nasty. The curveball is disgusting. It's a really good pitch for him.
I cannot wait to see Jackson Job Tuesday. I cannot wait to see Jackson Job Saturday or Sunday. I cannot wait to see Jackson Job a week from Friday. It's must-see TV for me going forward here. Really excited to see what it looks like in the middle of May. That's really when I'm eager to see what it looks like. But yeah, it's been a fun thing. How you Lee kind of makes you want to do a little deeper dive and some pretty impressive stuff from a prospect we didn't talk enough about, and it's caught a lot of people's eye here early in the spring. Thoughts on that one?
I really like Hao-Yu Lee as an all-around player. My biggest thing with him is, and I don't mean this as a knock on Hao-Yu Lee at all, but he's really good at a lot of things. Is he really great at anything? I don't really think so. And can he maybe grow into greatness in certain aspects of his game? Sure, I certainly think so. But right now I'm watching Hao-Yu Lee, and I'm just curious how things are translating against big league caliber opponents. He drew a really impressive 12-pitch walk in Saturday's game, but at the same time, in Saturday's game, in that 12-pitch walk, he also followed off a bunch of middle pitches that I would have loved to have seen him drive, to the big part of the field and turn up with a double or maybe a home run in a situation like that. But he followed those pitches away. And so, yes, the walk was really impressive. He knows the strike zone, but at the same time, why wasn't he able to jump on some of those middle pitches and hammer him for extra bases? So for a guy like Hao-Yu Lee, I'm just watching to see how does he respond to big league pitchers? How does he react to being in this, big league camp type of environment? He hasn't been around these types of players before. Now he is. It's kind of his first little taste. He's a guy that, again, I could see him getting called up post-trade deadline and being the starting third baseman for the Detroit Tigers. Like, I could see a world in which that happens. That would not shock me if we get to the trade deadline and we come out of it on the other side and Hao-Yu Lee is a starting third baseman for the Detroit Tigers. That wouldn't shock me. But at the same time, it also wouldn't shock me if he needs a lot of time in Toledo because, again, he's a guy who's really good at a lot of different things. He makes contact. He makes good swing decisions. He's got some power. He can run the bases well, but he doesn't have any elite attributes. So how does that translate over to the big leagues when the pitchers are only going to be getting tougher? Is everything going to stay average, or are some of those things going to fall maybe below average? Or is he going to rise to the occasion, and is he going to become above average in certain things? Like, that's what I'm interested to see when it comes to his long-term development. Definitely a guy to watch. Again, he's getting a lot of attention. He's getting a lot of praise, as he should be, but I'm just kind of like, I don't know. I'm being a little bit cautious on the Hao-Yu Lee hype train, even though I'm definitely interested in the prospect. Definitely there's a lot of upside. The big question is going to be, can he actually do this against MLB caliber pitchers, the best of the best, the elite pitchers in the game? What kind of performance do we see from Hao-Yu Lee? We just won't know until he gets there.
Well, Evan Petzold and Mark Gorash do a podcast together. I'll tell you why. Because about 3 days ago, I tweeted something about Hao-Yu Lee, and it was almost exactly what you just said. So I'm anxious to see what it looks like, though, on about March 15th. That's what I want to really see, how he adapts, if his game picks up, if he raises his game, if as the pitching gets better, his swing gets better. All right, question one of the big two. Pretty easy transition based on that discussion. The first 2 weeks of spring training are in the books, Ev. What stood out to you?
Yeah, it's still so early, so I'm not putting too much stock into a lot of different things, but I've had a lot of thoughts about the opening day roster. And that's kind of where I'm at after 2 weeks in spring training, as I just continue to think about the opening day roster, where my predictions were, where they might be moving forward. On February 13th, so this was 11 days ago, I made my latest roster prediction, version 3.0. And I had some bold predictions, some would say. I had Javier Baez starting at shortstop. I had Jace Jung starting at third base. I had Matt Vierling starting in right field. I had Kerry Carpenter as the everyday designated hitter. I had Dylan Dingler, Andy Ibanez, Zach McKinstry, Justyn-Henry Malloy as the four players on the MLB bench, with Trey Sweeney, Spencer Torkelson, and Wencio Perez in AAA Toledo. I had Jackson Jobe as the number 4 starter, and I had Kenta Maeda as the number 5 starter, with Casey Mize and Kader Montero in AAA Toledo. 11 days later, I feel great about all those predictions after watching some things unfold in spring training. Jace Jung at third base, Jahan on the MLB bench, Trey Sweeney in AAA Toledo, Kenta Maeda as the number 5 starter, Casey Mize in AAA Toledo. Those are probably the 5 most notable predictions I had 11 days ago. And after further evaluation, I don't feel any differently about those predictions as we sit right now. Like Jace Jung at third base, it's the upside of the bat. The defense is a huge problem. It's going to be below average to whatever is worse than below average, whether that's bad or awful, however you want to describe that. But the bat is real. He makes smart swing decisions. He draws a lot of walks, has a ton of power. Can he hit velocity? Can he make enough contact? Those are both fair questions. But his upside at the MLB level in 2025 as a rookie is 250 with 20 home runs. You're going to take that upside all day long. That's why I'm all in on Jace Jung at third base despite the defense. Justyn-Henry Malloy on the MLB bench. Yet the Tigers, they have Andy Ibanez and Zach McKinstry as 2 of their 3 bench bats, not counting backup catcher Dylan Dingler. So you have 1 more bench spot available. And with the lineup being as left-handed as it is, even if you don't have Trey Sweeney, I think it needs to be a right-handed hitter on the bench with some power. Let's say Kerry Carpenter is in the game and the opposing team brings in a nasty left-handed reliever, and you've already used Andy Ibanez. So do you want Wencio Perez, Justyn-Henry Malloy, or Spencer Torkelson getting that pinch hit at bat in a big moment against a lefty reliever? Wencio Perez, he had a 594 OPS versus lefties last year. Jahan, he had an 893 OPS versus lefties last year. Torkelson had a 798 OPS versus lefties last year. So you need a powerful swing from a right-handed pinch hitter against a left-handed reliever. The numbers don't lie. Give me Justyn-Henry Malloy all day long. And the other one, Trey Sweeney in AAA Toledo. Look, Trey Sweeney, he saved the Tigers' magical season last year with that play he made in Baltimore, going out on the ball. Riley Green came in, they crashed. Trey Sweeney makes the catch and then has the wherewithal to throw the ball in to keep the runner from tagging up. It was brilliant. But at the same time, he struck out a lot. He had swing and miss issues, especially in the playoffs. I'm not a Trey Sweeney hater, not by any means. But the Tigers lineup is too left-handed. and Javier Baez is healthy. So if Javier Baez is the regular shortstop, which is what he's being paid $25 million to do, and the Tigers are not eating the remaining $73 million of Javi Baez's contract, so Baez is going to be on the opening day roster. And if he's going to be on the opening day roster, he is going to play. So where does Trey Sweeney fit in? Not on the MLB bench, because the Tigers have Zach McKinstry, a left-handed hitter, fellow left-handed hitter, who also plays shortstop. So if McKinstry is the backup shortstop, if Baez is the starting shortstop, then there just isn't room for Trey Sweeney. And I think he can still further his development, especially on offense, with the swing and miss issues in AAA Toledo. So that's where I see him ending up. So that's how I feel about Jace Jung, Trey Sweeney, Justyn-Henry Malloy. We will get to Kenta Maeda and the Casey Mize. That's those two guys go together in that conversation. We can get to that later in the show. But that's how I feel about Jace Jung, Trey Sweeney, and Jay Hen. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, but that's just kind of where I'm at as we're 2 weeks into spring training. And I look back at the predictions that I made 11 days ago, and after seeing some things unfold, it just kind of makes sense.
I think in the last week of February, it isn't even March 1st yet, that's a pretty spot-on prediction. I think 2 weeks from now, we may feel a whole lot different than we feel today, but we need to see these guys play. We need to see them do more than get stretched out in their first outing. We need to see Javi Baez play. We need to see Javi Baez have 35 at-bats. We need to see how his health holds up. We need to see how he plays 5 innings, 4 days in a row. Lots of things. The most impressive thing I saw this weekend were the first 2 swings from Jace Jung. He was all over both. He hit the ball harder than he hit almost at any time during his call-up for the last 5 weeks. We still need to see if he can play better than Nicholas Castellanos caliber third base. But hey, if he's going to hit 20 dongs and, be a 105 WRC plus, we may tolerate some pretty terrible defense at third base. It's very important for Jace Jung leading camp as the regular or 70% third baseman, let's say, is for having Javi Baez be the regular shortstop. That's what I have to say. It makes it much easier to do. Get another right-hand bat in the lineup, and Javi plays some pretty damn good defense at short. So, especially when he's healthy. All right. Question 2, the big 2. We just talked about Jace Jung. We're going to talk about him some more. So, can Jace Jung hit enough to be the starter at third base on the opening day roster?
Jace, if you are listening, I know I just dogged your defense. Granted, I praised your upside on offense, but I did dog your defense. But hear me out here. I believe in you, Jace. And here's why. Mark, I just believe in the person here. He's a gritty player, tough as nails, never gives up, confident in himself, fearless. Those are all the things that I would want in a player on my big league team. If I was a manager, if I was a president of baseball operations, like Jace Jung is the kind of guy that I want going to battle night in and night out for my team. That's just what I want because he's that kind of a guy. And he has all of those things. When you talk about gritty player, never gives up, confident, fearless, like that is Jace Jung. And additionally, the Tigers want him to make the opening day roster. It is very clear that Jace Jung is plan A after missing out on Alex Bregman. Jace Jung, I expect, will make the opening day roster as the starting third baseman. And then we'll see what happens from there. Just because he's the third baseman on the opening day roster doesn't mean he's going to be the third baseman for the Tigers after the first 2 weeks of the season, or at the All-Star break, or at the trade deadline, or in the postseason. But I think he is going to get every opportunity to be that guy for the Tigers, which puts him on the opening day roster at third base, regardless of where the offense or defense is at in spring training. I think Jace Jung is plan A going into the 2025 season, no matter what happens in camp. It's great if he hits. It's great if he plays good defense, but it just seems like Jace Jung is plan A for the Tigers. They already gave him a taste last year. He's been around this team. He's close to this group. It just makes so much sense. The offensive upside is there. There are serious concerns on defense and big question marks. But if not now for Jace Jung, when? And so that's why I think the time is now for him. He is plan A. Mark, do you have any thoughts on where he kind of fits in? I know it's a really big spring for him, but at the same time, it just seems like with the upside he provides on offense, look, this is a team that they to address their offense, they went out and got Gleyber Torres. That was it. They swapped Gleyber Torres for Spencer Torkelson, and that was how they addressed the offense. They need more offense. Jace Jung gives you that offensive upside, even though there are huge concerns about the defense. Where are you at on this one, Mark?
Well, I think Jace Jung might be plan A, but I think Matt Vierling is plan A minus. So, which means you never know what happens over the course of the next month. So let me throw out a few wild cards here. I would say percentage-wise, they're pretty low. I'd say Jace Jung, I'd put it even money to have things work the way you suggested. But at the same time, if Jace Jung is only kind of good and shows some defensive concerns, what then happens if J-Hen hits the piss out of the baseball? What happens if Spencer Torkelson is the new Spencer Torkelson, who's the old Spencer Torkelson of 2023? What happens if Wenceel Perez is hitting the cover off the baseball? Then you start being forced to give some consideration to other alternatives. Does Kerry Carpenter play more right field against Evan Petzold's better judgment? Does Wenceel Perez play a lot of right field hitting left-handed while Matt Vierling plays third base? Does, a right-handed DH who can hit the ball out of the ballpark and walk a little bit suddenly emerge from J-Hen or Torkelson? Crazy stuff happens in spring training. One of those guys is going to have to knock the door down of those three guys. Matt Vierling is going to start somewhere. The question is, between Jung, Torkelson, Malloy, and Perez, who earns a spot in the lineup as opposed to being given a spot in the lineup? That will be the fascinating answer of the next month.
Well, we might not get the answer until we get into the season, though, Mark, because, again, remember what happened with Parker Meadows last year. When the game plan was Parker Meadows is going to be on the opening day roster as the everyday center fielder. And look what happened. He got sent down to AAA Toledo, and Matt Vierling and Riley Green had to play center, and everything changed, right? I think, for now, plan A, Jace Jung at third base, but things can change. And they might not change as soon as the opening day roster, but if we get a few weeks into the season and Jace Jung isn't showing up offensively and the defense is a real problem, then yeah, maybe there is an opportunity there to shuffle some things around. But I think where we sit right now, Jace Jung at third base for the Tigers on opening day, it just makes way too much sense. The offensive upside is real. We'll see how he develops defensively. There are real concerns, and I understand those concerns, but I think it's going to be something that we're going to navigate as we go, and hopefully there's enough offense, not only in spring, but also as we get into the regular season, that we can live with whatever he does at third base. But all right, let's take a break. When we come back, we are joined by Bobby Scales, who is getting 100 games on the radio in the 2025 season, plus some games on TV. I'd like to welcome Bobby Scales, our favorite guest, to the Days of Roar podcast. Bobby, we've had you on the podcast many times, but listen, for our new listeners, all right, Bobby Scales is the radio analyst for the Detroit Tigers radio network alongside play-by-play voice Dan Dickerson. And before broadcasting, Bobby played for the University of Michigan in college, the Chicago Cubs in MLB, multiple teams in Japan, followed by working as the director of player development for the Los Angeles Angels. With that being said, Bobby, thank you for coming back on the podcast. We've missed you, man.
I'm glad to be back with my people, man. I was, it's been a long off season. I haven't heard from you guys, and you gave me a call. I'm like, yeah, let's get on here. Let's do this again.
Yeah, well, spring training is now underway. The off season is in the books, and who better to ask? Like, spring training is here. What is it like, spring training as a player, spring training as an executive? Can you kind of walk us through both of those different things? Like, what is it like going to camp as a player? What is it like going to camp as an executive? And how do you balance both those things in their respective roles?
Yeah, no, spring training as a player is it's the beginning of its fun. You get to see your buddies again. There's new people coming in. Sometimes you're going into a new situation, but it's fun, man. A lot of guys, some guys live in Arizona. When I was playing, I was living in Atlanta the entire time I was playing. So there were some years where I had been out in grass and dirt and got a chance to work and get some work in on the field. There's other years where it's too cold, or particularly in Atlanta in the springtime, it's not always so cold, but a lot of times it's really rainy right before you take off for spring camp. So you've had varying degrees of work out on the field. And I would always get there early into spring training, as most guys do now. But I always used to come in like 10 days before camp started. And it was just fun. You get to just little things like you get to you get into the facility, you get to your locker, your boxes are in there, you open your boxes up. And, the best day of any baseball player's career is when your bats come in. So your bats are sitting there. So you got to give it the rattle in the box first to hear them rattling around. Then you pop them open, see if they feel right. The cleats, the stuff, all the gear. It's fantastic going to spring training. Like you said, you're talking to your buddies that you hadn't seen, or in some cases, you're talking to guys you had played against for a long time. And all of a sudden now they're teammates with you. So it's really good. it's really good to get back in that environment and to enjoy that with the guys. So, and then as an executive, it's tension filled, man. You've done a lot of hard work to fill out the rosters as best you can to make the improvements. You're hoping guys come into camp. You're anxious to see where guys are when they come in. Some guys say they've been working out. They look great. They show up to spring training and they've had nothing but cake and pie all off season and they look terrible. And you've got other guys that look different. They say, they're in great shape and they come in and look like bodybuilders. And that's not going to work either. So you got to work to get them back into a playable condition. So it's the best of times and the worst of times at the same time. You're excited about stuff, then you show up sometimes and you see things aren't necessarily what they were represented to be by the guys you had contact with in the off season. And it's a lot. Spring training is a lot. It's wall to wall for like 50 plus days. You're up early, in the morning, going in early, 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, and you're the last people out on the executive side. So it's fun. It's tense. It's worrisome. It's exciting. It's all of those things wrapped up into one.
All right, let's jump into the player side because I always, look, here we watched the baseball game today. We got to see it on TV. Game 2, guys have been down there for a few weeks. We listened to game 1. We watched a bunch of guys that either were, especially after the 5th inning, that were either in A or AA. And they're facing guys, pitchers are ruthless mothers, those guys, because they're usually throwing already for a while by the time they're getting down here. And you see a lot of guys first time in a major league type game with major league eyes on them, with major league players who started the game, their first opportunity to play in front of execs, coaches, etc. And, it's got the first at bat sometimes got to be pretty hard. Here, we had Jace had 2 super good swings and hit rockets his first 2 times up. Some of the kids that played later in the game that we've heard a lot about, Lorenzo, Campos, etc., swings were much tougher. And it wasn't like they were facing major league pitchers either, but they were facing guys that had pretty close to major league stuff too. So it's always interesting. How do you respond as a player when you're getting your first time to try to show out a little bit, but it's game 2? The fans take it too seriously, or the players, are they feeling the stress a little bit in that situation?
Oh, it's both. It's all of those things. My first experience, and like you said, some of those kids are coming over like the second half of the game. They're guys that came over from the minor league camp that aren't even in major league spring training formally. That was my first experience back when I was playing, back when I was with the Padres. I got a chance to go over and that kind of stuff. But, I think most of the fans who are somewhat educated on baseball, they understand a lot of these guys they're not going to see, or they're not going to see for a couple of years, and they're just filling in for some of the big league guys. But I'm going to tell you right now, from a perspective of a player in that situation, listen, if they're on the other team and they got a different color jersey on, then in that moment, they're a big leaguer and I'm trying to do some damage. I'm trying to do something, whether it's a pitcher, he's trying to punch out the side or have some really electric stuff on the mound. Or if you're a hitter, you're trying to get something to drive and hit hard. You want to make that impression. And yeah, you put too much pressure on yourself, and you can see by some of the swings some of these young men take, you put too much pressure on yourself or whatever, but that's to be expected. That's part of it. And you don't know until you go through those things. It's like most things in life, you don't know till you do it. And in due time, those guys get enough at bats under their belt. The game will slow down and they'll realize they don't have to do anything special. They just have to do what they're supposed to do and do it at a level that they're accustomed to doing it. There's a reason you're even in this conversation, right? Because you're pretty good at playing baseball. And so once you relax and you understand that, you're able to perform. But yeah, those first 2 opportunities you get, when Skip's watching, when AJ's watching, when Scott and the rest of the brain trust are watching, yeah, they it and you feel it and you want to do something to give them something to look at. Sometimes you just try too hard.
Let's put your front office cap on now. We need to talk about the offseason for the Tigers, adding Jack Flaherty, Alex Cobb, Gleyber Torres, Tommy Kahnle, and John Brebbia, all from free agency. What are your thoughts on the offseason for the Tigers?
Well, I think they did a nice job to address some needs they had. We had talked extensively in the latter part of the season and then throughout the offseason about acquiring a right-handed bat. Now, obviously, there's a target we're going to talk about here soon that was one of the prime targets to be one of those right-handed bats. It didn't reveal itself, but this team was very left-handed. The first projected starting lineup was very left-handed, and getting someone who could be an everyday player and hit from the right side and be a proven bat, not just a guy we're hoping to take a step forward or a guy we're hoping for a bounce back from was important. So they were aggressive in getting Gleyber Torres. And then from the pitching side, I will tell you, we had this discussion quite a bit. Our bullpen was tremendous. The thing that scares me about our bullpen is just the workload over the last couple of years. They've been very, very good. And I know these guys are in tremendous condition. And I know these guys have, and AJ and Chris Fetter and the rest of the Tiger Pitching Brain Trust have done a tremendous job at, one, keeping these guys healthy, and then two, making sure that they are doing enough to get them enough rest between appearances. That said, innings are starting to pile up, and you had to reinforce the bullpen. And you can do that in two ways. You can reinforce the bullpen by going and getting more bullpen pieces, more experienced bullpen pieces to add, which can push some of that depth down. And then you can also do it by enhancing the starting pitching. And that's what they've done on all fronts. So sure, you can look at, not getting Bregman, not landing Bregman for whatever the reasons may be is a negative point. But for the most part, they addressed some of their needs and they did a nice job of doing so.
Any thoughts on the Tigers missing out on Alex Bregman, who signed with the Boston Red Sox? And additionally, do you think the combination of Jace Jung, Andy Ibanez, and Matt Vierling is enough at the third base position in 2025?
Well, certainly when you have an opportunity to get a player like Bregman, you want to. I mean, he's going to play out this year. I believe it's 31, which is still, for some 31 to cliff. I don't think that's going to be the case with him at all. He looks like to be in pretty good shape. He seemed to have avoided major injuries throughout his career, and he's managed to continue to be productive, both offensively and defensively, which is, the calling card for him, being a very well-rounded baseball player. And he's won, and he's played for AJ. So there's a lot of reasons that you wanted him to put that Old English D on. They made an offer that they felt was competitive, and he chose to go a different direction. It is what it is. That's the game. That's life. That's business. But again, do I think that that three-headed monster is going to be enough? You hope so. You hope you can put all three of those guys in solid situations and they can do what they do. Obviously, the lion's share, if it were to pan out with that combination, with Jace Jung being left-handed, he's going to get the lion's share of the opportunities against the right-handed pitching. We know what Andy Ibanez is capable of doing against left-handed pitching, and then you're going to also use Vierling at that third base spot too when the situation dictates. He's going to play. He seems like he's going to play a lot just because of his performance last year and his versatility, which is a huge plus for Tiger fans and for obviously skipper AJ Hinch. So would you like an everyday guy, a guy to bat second or third and put in at third base 140 times a year? Without question, you would. But as it stands right now, it looks like that's going to be what they're going to roll out there. We are super early. I mean, what are we after game 2 in spring? So this could all change tomorrow if somebody calls Scott with a deal he likes and some pieces start moving around. So, I don't even know if I can properly answer that question. It's so early in the spring. I don't even know if that's a fair question, Evan, but I don't know because this is still technically the offseason. There's still time to make moves and do the different things. So, and guys will come available as spring training progresses.
Bob, I don't know if you get a chance to see Jace Jung's 2 swings today, but to me, those 2 swings were better than any 2 swings he took in the last 5 weeks of the season last year. You could tell the difference. You could tell how much the wrist may have been hurting him and how much better these 2 swings looked, and the way the ball came off the bat was vastly different. The next question I have about that is, though, and it's fair, and think about, I ask this from an executive standpoint. How much does Jace Jung have to hit to make up for probably what is going to be deficiencies defensively at third base? And there's a second part to that question. Yes, he's hitting left-handed, but if Javi's going to be the shortstop and can contribute even moderately close to, say, 2023, how much easier does it make to play Jace at third base if Javi can contribute as a right-handed bat at short?
Well, the first part of that question, when you're healthy, it makes a world of difference. I applaud Jace Jung for not saying a word and not making a big deal out of it. He went out there and he did the best he could last year, but you could tell based on the bat speed, the eyeball test. We've got metrics for that, but eyeball test, that bat's it wasn't moving through the zone the way it had been advertised. I hadn't I'm still only my 3rd year. I hadn't gotten a really clear look at Jace in the minor leagues like you guys had, and like some other people that cover and follow the Tigers had. And you kept hearing about this pop and this bat speed, and I didn't see it. Now I didn't know also he was struggling with that wrist, but there's no doubt that the bat speed's improved and he looks healthier. He feels healthier. And you can tell the guy's body language and the way there's pep in his step. He knows he's right. And so he's going to, he's again, to make up for, defensive deficiencies, whatever they may be. Obviously, I think he'll be better than he was a year ago just because of work and maturity. But yeah, you got to pull a little bit. That's just the nature of the beast. That's anybody. That's not, specifically Jace Jung. But as far as the second piece you're saying, with Javi, if Javi can come back and end up being a somewhat productive offensive player at shortstop, then yeah, it certainly helps your defense. And the defense is going to need to be solid on the infield as it has been the previous 2 years. Now you're taking I know this is not part of the question, but it's related because it's a thing. You're moving Colt Keith to first base, new at the position, ended up being about an average defender at second base, made some really good strides, but you're also replacing him with Gleyber Torres. And this ain't a knock. That is what it is. Graded out as one of the worst defensive second basemen in the game last year. So, it's going to be really important. Really, truly, it's going to be important for Javi for a lot of reasons. For Javi to recover some offensive prowess so he can stabilize that infield a little bit, hopefully help Jace Jung on that left side and also help that infield defense as a whole.
Bobby, it's really fascinating. When the Tigers signed Gleyber Torres, they made Colt Keith the everyday first baseman without ever seeing him play first base. What do you think about that decision? And ultimately, how do you see that going in 2025? Do you think Colt Keith is athletic enough to translate over to first base and be, say, an average first baseman?
I do. I think it's going to be rocky early because it's always going to be rocky early. And I have pounded this drum since the day I retired and the day I stepped into a front office role in 2012. And that is everybody loves to throw people at first base. First base is a difficult position to play. There are big time nuances over there that you only experience once you have played the position in a game when it mattered and had to make those decisions. You can make all those decisions you want in a practice scenario. You can do what you want. You can bring minor league guys in to run. You can add time pressure to it. But until it's real over there at first base in a game situation, it is difficult. It is a difficult position to play. Not to mention, besides the pitcher and the catcher, nobody on the baseball field handles the ball more than the first baseman. So everybody loves to just throw people over there. So I say all that to say, you have to have ultimate faith in the athletic ability and the makeup of the player, and more so the makeup. Colt Keith is more than athletic enough to play over there. You have to have ultimate faith in the makeup of that player. When you come ask him, hey, listen, this is what we're thinking about doing. What do you think about that? And 99% of the guys you ask him are going to say yes, but can you really believe him? And I think they believe that Colt Keith has enough between his ears and enough guts and enough work ethic to make himself a average first baseman. To me, the little nuanced things are some of the navigating around the bag and the short hops and the different kind of hops you're going to get, understanding the different cuts and all the different grasses you're going to get when you're getting some of those throws in the dirt. Those are the little nuanced pieces that are very difficult to simulate until you get them in the game. And, it's going to take some work. It's going to take some rep. But as we saw with him at second base last year, he made tremendous strides every single month. And I think that's what it's going to look like in 2025.
I want to ask you about young players too. Riley Green is now established. He's been an all-star, but the Tigers have a ton of other young players with pretty significant upside. Colt Keith, Parker Meadows, Kerry Carpenter, Jace Jung, Justyn-Henry Malloy, Wenzel Perez, Trey Sweeney, Dylan Dingler, Reese Olson, Jackson Jobe, like a couple pitchers there, a lot of position players. Who are your candidates for progression and regression with those young players? Shoot us straight here, because not everyone's going to get better, right? And how do you balance that as a front office? And what's some of your insight into those young players who could be really, really good, but also like some of them might take steps back too?
Yeah, I mean, as far as a progression, I don't think there's any question that Kerry Carpenter, for me, is a guy I would love to see him handle left-handed pitching, and just you can write his name in there, whether it's 2, whether it's 3, whether it's 4 or 5, just write his name in there 140 times a game and be done with it, because he is some kind of dangerous when he goes to the dish. There's some swing and miss in his game. There's a little bit of chase, but the pitchers know too, if I miss in a certain spot, he can hit it off the wall or lose one in a hurry. And the thing that I like the most about Kerry is that he got knocked on his defense when he got to the big leagues. That dude has worked really hard on his defense. He has become a very respectable right fielder. He throws the ball at the right bases. You're going to get a real honest effort out of him every time the ball's hit his direction. And most importantly, he backs up plays when he's backside or where he's always where he needs to be on the baseball field. So he wants to be an everyday player. He knows that him handling left-handed pitching is going to be a thing. And he's made strides everywhere else. And I think that if given the opportunity, he's going to really solidify himself as an everyday player in the big leagues. And the other guy that I love this guy, you know this, Mark, you're going to laugh when I say this. I love Wenzel Perez. I love the guy. I love the human. I also love the baseball player. And I love what he brings to the Tigers. You got a guy that's athletic. He's learning the outfield, made some gaffes out there. He also made some really good plays. He's athletic. He can throw. And then from offensively, you get a guy who gives you the quality of at-bats he gave you from the day he got to the big leagues last year until the final game of the season from both sides of the plate. That is a tremendous weapon for AJ to know that he's got a guy that no matter what handedness the pitcher is out there, that he can either run in a pinch hit situation or he can leave in if they go to the bullpen and flip him around and you're going to get a quality at bat. I think he's a huge candidate to step up and solidify himself as a real piece of this Tiger team.
We got to ask you about the elephant in the room, which is you got Spencer Torkelson really needs to have a good spring to even have a chance at going north with the team. And we saw a lot of interesting progression from Justyn-Henry Malloy. I was watching the game today and I said to somebody when I was watching, Justyn-Henry Malloy lately, especially the last, part of September and in the playoffs, just looks a lot more hitterish. It's a baseball term we all like to use, but
yeah, right.
Justyn-Henry Malloy could do some damage. And if he continues to progress, it's a bat you really got to start thinking about how you can fit in a lineup too. Ev and I have had many an argument about this, but talk to us about what it is being a player in their kind of circumstance where you're kind of on the edge of making the team. You really got to show out and what it's like to be that guy.
I haven't necessarily been that guy in a spring training camp because these guys, they have more of a pedigree, but the pressure is the same. You got to show up, you got to do something. And that's just what it is. And then people, that's a lot of pressure. Yeah, it is. But, that's what you sign up for when you put that big league suit on. Torque's up against it. And Jahan's up against it too. I think Torque's up against it for different reasons. He's supposedly been the guy, and one could argue that it wasn't necessarily his fault. He was rushed, he was this, he was that. But the bottom line is the people that, supposedly or allegedly rushed him to the big leagues aren't here anymore. And so, employee number 20 is employee number 20. It doesn't matter who's in the front office. And he's got to do what he needs to do to make this team. And then the one thing I will say that I thought was interesting when it came out in the offseason at one point is that Scott basically said that there's going to be no experiments with him in right or left field. So it's going to be DH at first base. Now, you already declared that Colt Keith, barring something, unfortunate happening, is going to be your everyday first baseman. So that means you're looking at some type of off the bench role or a DH role, which really doesn't fit with this roster as currently put together. So, he's going to have some absolute monster spring training, I think. And some other things are going to have to happen that I'm not going to talk about, whether that be a Colt Keith injury or just maybe even a Gleyber Torres injury and you move Colt back to second. And you don't want those things to happen. So he's up against it. Now I think Jahan showed enough to where last year, not just down the stretch, but in the playoffs that, okay, we saw him make some significant adjustments at the major league level in season that led to production. Because at one point we were wondering how he was still staying on this roster because it was just over half his at-bats he was struck out. And, he got back to staying in the middle of the field and then got to staying on some balls and hit some balls hard to right center field and hit some balls. He hit one ball. I want to say it was in Minnesota. It was a homer, but it was to just to the left of center field. I could be wrong, but it was a ball he really struck well, and it was in the middle of the field. And from that point forward, he was a different hitter. And the quality of his at-bats against left-handed pitching were better, and the quality of his bats against right-handed pitching or just pitching in general were better. And he made a case for himself at the end to the point where he got meaningful at-bats in the playoffs as well. So, yeah, spring training is important. It's a weird deal because in the front office, you're always taught from the day you step in the front office, the day you step into a scouting scenario or evaluation scenario. Okay, let's not get fooled by spring training. But for those two players in particular, spring training is very important. So, that's just how it is. And they got to have good springs and impressive springs. And when you're in that situation as a player, you kind of tell yourself, I'm going to knock this thing out the park. I'm going to put my best foot forward and I'm going to make them make a difficult decision.
For Spencer Torkelson, let's not forget he hit 31 home runs in a big league season. I know you've never done that, but you have been grinding in AAA, trying to get back to the show before. Can you help us understand what is this going to be like for Torkelson in 2020, 2025? Assuming, again, and it's kind of like it's going to happen, right? He's going to get sent down to Toledo to start the season. Like, there just doesn't really seem to be a fit for him on this roster. When that does happen, if that does happen, what is it going to be like for Tork being down in AAA, trying to work his way back to the big leagues? Can you kind of take us through what that's like as a player?
Yeah, well, we'll go with if, because everybody's still in camp and everybody's still got a chance right now. So, if that were to happen, he's going to have to take a moment and reset. Now, I'll say this, the fortunate part of it is if indeed that does happen, he's been there before. It's not like this would be the first time he's had this demotion. It won't be like the first time he's realized he's got to work on some things and continue to grind to get back to where he wants to be. So I don't think he won't like it. No player likes it. No player likes getting sent out for any reason, even if it's no fault of your own. I got sent out one time in Chicago because we had played a 16-inning game, needed another arm. And it was what it was. I was playing great, but I had options. So I went down. I didn't like it, but you get, I always call it the plane ride. You get the plane ride or the drive back to be pissed. Because once your feet hit the ground, wherever you are, that becomes your big leagues. That's where I used to tell guys too. Okay, you want to get back to the big leagues? Well, you got to treat today wherever you are, whether it's A-ball, whether it's Lakeland, whether it's, Erie. You got to treat today as the big leagues because you don't get another chance unless you act that way and perform. So that would be the only thing you can say is, hey, listen, you got to perform today. Do your level best to get better today and perform to make them make a difficult decision. And, I wouldn't expect them to like it. You don't want guys to like it. You don't want guys being complacent in that situation.
All right. So before we get out of here, I got a favorite question for you. So how much emphasis should people be putting on what guys are doing in the spring? And how much does a manager really understand maybe a little bit more than what's transpiring in spring games or looking at things in a little more specific way? So try to explain to people how important what's going on down there is or sometimes is not.
Well, and I think that the way you framed the last part of that question is the key. There are definitely players that spring training is vitally important for. We just outlined why spring training is important for Torque. We just outlined why spring training is important for J-Hen. Spring training will be important for that group over there, third base, who's going to end up getting the lion's share of the work as you move into the season. I think spring training is going to be important in a certain sense for Colt Keith learning a new position. There are also guys who spring training is not going to be important for. Spring training, outside of getting timing and feeling good, spring training is not going to be important for Riley Green. Riley Green's going to play left field every day for the Detroit Tigers. Same thing with Tarek Skubals. We don't even have to go into how good he was last year. He's going to get the ball opening night, and the objective in spring training are far different than they are for Jackson Joe. So, or for Matt Manning, or for Casey Mize, right? So there's all varying degrees of importance on spring training and what this, coaching staff and front office leadership group need to see from each one of these guys in spring training. So, depending on the team, depending on where the team is as far as guys that are locked in, I always used to say about barring anything crazy happening, about 80% of what you think is going to happen in spring training, or I would say 80% of the decisions are made before you go in. And sometimes that 80% for let's just use our opening day opponents. For the Dodgers, there's a lot less spots up for grabs. It's just kind of who's going to play where. What that team's going to look like going, as they head north from Arizona. For a team like ours, there's more decisions. And for a team like, our friends our AL Central friends, the White Sox, this is probably trial camp over there. So, that's just how it goes, and the funny part is, I remember Dexter Fowler's a good friend of mine, and he told me one time, I think he is when he got traded from Colorado to Houston. And he said, I looked around and I went to spring and we were in spring training, and it was like me and Altuve and not Dallas Braden, the left-hander with the big beard that was on Dallas Keuchel. He's like, we were three guys. We knew we were on a team. He said, the rest of it was like, we might have it's 22 spots open on this team. That was the year they were really, really, really bad. I feel like it was 13, but he's like, I had never been in a situation where all of these spots were up for grabs. So again, I would say that there's some guys we know are on this club. Jake Rogers is going to catch, he's on this club. Who's going to be his number two? I think there's probably a little play in that. There's obviously, there's some competition in camp for that. So, we probably know that the majority of that bullpen is intact. And there might be a couple spots here or there, depending on what that looks like. So there's a wide variety of importance depending on who you are on this Tiger roster.
All right, Bobby, that's all we have for you, but thanks for joining Days of Roar. I'm sure we'll have you back on very soon, probably within the first month of the season. We always learn so much from you, and we cannot thank you enough for coming on the show.
Always a pleasure, fellas. Appreciate it.
Everyone, that was Bobby Scales, former MLB player, former MLB executive, and current radio analyst for the Detroit Tigers. We have more to discuss, but first, let's take a break.
All right. It's always the most fun you and I have almost talking to Bobby Scales. It's so informative, and we just love the guy. What do you want me to say? I mean, it's a blast talking to him, and get ready, people, because we will be talking to him many more times during the course of the season, and I'm damn excited that he's doing 100 games this year. All right. So let's talk about some fun stuff. It's the last week of February, and the question is, if Jackson Jobe is a lot for the rotation, and he is a lot, are you picking Kenta Maeda? And it took me a whole year to get that name pronunciation correct, by the way. I've yelled it a good 30 times. Or is Casey Mize, the perennial on the verge Casey Mize, the fifth starter on the opening day roster? Who you got?
Casey Mize can change my mind. He has all spring training to do it, and I am going to be an open book, ready for him to change my mind. But I'm all in on Kenta Maeda as the number 5 starter, which sends Casey Mize to AAA Toledo. That's what I predicted, and I'm still standing by that. Kenta Maeda is owed $10 million. Tigers are not going to eat that money, from everything that I've heard. We'll see if that changes, but I don't see that happening. Meanwhile, Casey Mize has minor league options remaining, so he can be sent to AAA Toledo. Kenta Maeda started the first game of spring training against the Phillies on Saturday. He threw 2 scoreless innings with 4 strikeouts. More importantly, his 4-seam fastball averaged 92.4 miles an hour and maxed out at 93.7 miles an hour. Remember, his fastball averaged less than 90 miles an hour in last year's spring training game. So the velocity this spring is up like 3 to 4 miles an hour from last spring. And if you go back to the 2024 season, Maeda didn't hit 92 miles an hour on the radar gun until June 16th. And he only threw 3 pitches all year that were faster than 93.6 miles an hour. But in 2025, Maeda already threw 93.7 miles an hour. And he did that on February 22nd. A fastball for Kenta Maeda that averages 92 miles an hour rather than the 90 miles an hour that it averaged last season is the key for him to unlock a better splitter and a better slider. Those 2 pitches can be more effective as swing and miss weapons if the hitter has to respect the fastball. He didn't have the fastball last year, so hitters were able to sit on that pitch while refusing to swing at the secondary pitches. So I think the fastball having more velocity on that is key to unlocking the full attack plan, and he's on the right track. So I'm pretty excited about Kenta Maeda, and I have been. That's why I had him on the opening day roster. He's been in my prediction as part of the starting rotation since Alex Cobb suffered that injury before spring training. The fastball is better because he threw 8 bullpens in Japan before coming to the United States for spring training, whereas last year he threw just 1 bullpen before coming to the U.S. for spring training. So the offseason routine was different this year, and the stuff is different this year. And I think the Tigers want to fix Kenta Maeda like it's a personal mission for Scott Harris, the guy who signed Kenta Maeda to a 2-year, $24 million contract. And what happened last year was unacceptable. I think Scott Harris wants to rewrite the narrative on the Kenta Maeda signing. And I think Chris Vedder and Robin Lund are on board with that, right? Like they redesigned his entire offseason program, and the fastball looks a lot better coming into spring training this year. Let's not forget, Kenta Maeda had a 3.36 ERA, 25 walks, 103 strikeouts across 88 and 1/3 innings in his final 17 games of the 2023 season with the Minnesota Twins. That's the upside. 3.36 ERA. That's the kind of upside that Kenta Maeda can give you. As for Casey Mize, he has minor league options remaining. And Casey Mize is determined to get better, but so is Kenta Maeda. And Casey Mize, he made changes to improve, but so did Kenta Maeda. So it's going to be a fascinating battle to watch as spring training goes along, but Kenta Maeda is going to be on the opening day roster, either as a starter or as a reliever. So in my book, that makes it more difficult for Casey Mize. We'll see if he can change my mind as spring training goes along. But Kenta Maeda is on the opening day roster, and that makes it tough for Casey Mize.
I think Kenta Maeda is going to have to prove to people before they break camp that he can get 15 outs in a game. If he can't get 15 outs in a game, then he's not worth taking. You don't need a passenger in the bullpen to come in when they're down 5 or up 5. Sorry. The days of those guys being on the roster for a team that hopefully can win 88 to 92 games. Yeah, you don't carry those guys. So eat the money, say goodbye if you can't do what he needs to do. As far as Casey Mize goes, I watched him today. I saw so many things I liked. I saw so many things I hated. And as I've said to you many times, Casey Mize is this close from being really good, like borderline number 3 starter, almost an all-star. This close of a breaking ball to be a swing and miss pitch. He's also this close from having no trade value and being in Toledo and people go, wow, what happened to Casey Mize? Just never made it, So that is the ballad of Casey Mize. Casey Mize is going to have to decide. Casey Mize threw no good breaking balls at all today, except one breaking ball for a called strike 3 that locked somebody up so tight that they had to come out, get him, wheel him off the field because he was unable to move. That's how badly he locked him up.
And that wasn't even his new breaking ball, Mark, because he has 3 sliders that he's throwing now. And the one that he threw to Paul Goldschmidt to catch him looking was the slider he had last season, which is kind of more cutterish anyway. But the point is that he has these new sliders that he's worked on, one with more sweep, one with more depth to try to get swing and miss. And the only good one that he threw was the old slider that he's confident throwing that one for strikes. And he used it because Paul Goldschmidt was sitting fastball there and Casey Mize fooled him. He was able to flip the old slider, as he called it, the old faithful slider in there. And it was pretty much just like a cutter that was essentially middle up. And Paul Goldschmidt was looking for a high velocity fastball. And it ended up being that old slider that gets tossed in there. And that's why he ended up getting that called third strikeout. But I didn't see Casey Mize miss bats with his new sliders. And that was a little bit disappointing to me. I was looking forward to seeing the slider with more sweep and the slider with more depth, missing some bats. He has to get around to that if he really wants to be a guy who's going to be in the Tigers rotation. Like to be a starter in the big leagues, you got to miss more bats. Casey Mize knows it. He tried to work on it, but we haven't really seen it. And what he did on Sunday too was he talked about wanting to throw more fastballs down in the zone to help his splitter, and he didn't throw many fastballs down in the zone either. So I want to see more out of Casey Mize. I think there's more in the tank for sure. But again, I've been saying that there's more in the tank for Casey Mize for a really long time now. Is he ever going to reach his potential? I don't know.
It's disturbing. It's disturbing because it's, like I said, so close and so close to being in Toledo. Another year, I would suggest, as you just did, maybe spin 7-8 sliders next time out to see where we're at with it, because you're going to have to do that at some point in time, because whatever was being thrown last year, I don't think it makes the roster. He throws what he threw last year. So
I don't want to discredit Casey Mize either. The stuff on Sunday was sharper than it has been in the past. I want to make that very, very clear. I think if Casey Mize has ever been on the right track, it's now. So I am very intrigued to see what happens the rest of the way, because the stuff was sharp. Fastball was sharp. He threw a couple sliders that were sharp. The splitter, he threw a couple good ones. There were some things that I really liked about Casey Mize. Like you said, he was a guy that, again, he's kind of somewhere in between. Really impressive and not so impressive. But I think the stuff as a whole was sharper, which makes me a little bit intrigued.
All right. Enough of Casey Mize. It's Casey Mize is the new question now that Alex Bregman is not a Tiger. All right. So been a couple of weeks. What's the early scouting report on how Cole Keith and Justyn-Henry Malloy look at first base so far?
Yeah, it's really early. So again, don't want to make too many grand determinations, but Justyn-Henry Malloy looks surprisingly really good at first base. Cole Keith has not jumped out to me as much as J-Hen, but I thought Colt looked pretty comfortable in Sunday's game against the Yankees, made some nice plays at first base. Ultimately, I think Cole Keith is going to be fine. J-Hen being way better than I expected at first base, it adds some intrigue to putting him on the opening day roster as that right-handed power-hitting bench bat. Not only is he a DH, but he can play first base and stand in the outfield. Granted, if he's pinch hitting in a close game, I wouldn't want him playing the outfield in a close game, so I'd rather him at DH anyway. But at least first base gives him a position he can be decent at, which wasn't the case for third base, and it's not the case for corner outfield. He's bad at those positions, but he's actually solid at first base from what I've seen so far. As for Colt Keith, I think he's going to be just fine, but it's definitely something I'm going to continue to watch closely as spring training rolls on. He made significant strides as the season went along at second base. I would expect him to do the same at first base. But the Jahan thing surprisingly jumped out to me. I think he looks pretty good at first base. I can't wait to see more from him.
So we got our first look at the ABS system the last 2 days. What are your thoughts? I'm pretty excited about it.
I love the automated ball strike challenge system. Every team gets 2 challenges. If you win, you get to keep your challenge. Jahmai Jones, who signed a minor league deal with the Detroit Tigers. By the way, Jeff Seidel has a great story on Jahmai Jones in the Free Press, freep.com. He called for the first ABS challenge in Joker Marchant Stadium history in a spring training game. He won the challenge. That happened in Saturday's game against the Phillies. I hope this comes to MLB in 2026. It's not happening in 2025, but it could happen in 2026. I think it's good for the players and it's good for the fans, and therefore it's good for the game. I like the idea of only having 2 challenges. If you win, you keep the challenge. If you lose the challenge. I think it also brings added strategy for teams. Like, when do you use your challenge? Early innings or late innings? Runners on or no runners on? Do all the players buy into the team strategy? Or does a player go rogue and challenge with nobody on and 2 outs in the first inning? I love the ABS challenge system as it is right now. 2 challenges per team in every game. I really hope this comes to the big leagues in 2026. I think it'll be really, really good for the game.
I'd like to see it implemented now. I loved it.
If only it were that easy.
Yeah, it's amazingly accurate, amazingly fast. Same zone, every game, every player, every inning. It's definitely an upgrade to what we've been doing. People can like the human aspect of it. I like the accurate aspect of it. All right, big question. When will Javier Baez start playing in some games?
Get ready, everybody, because the Javier Baez train is coming. The final running test that he has coming back from the season-ending hip surgery that he had in early September. The final running test is scheduled for Wednesday, February 26th. So his first game, as long as that goes well in that final running test, which the Tigers anticipate it will, is going to be at the end of the week. So maybe Thursday, February 27th against the Red Sox in Lakeland, or Friday, February 28th against the Blue Jays in Dunedin. I think the Tigers hope they can get him into games before the beginning of March. So that would be Thursday or Friday. Javi Baez has been moving around great. He looks healthy. We'll see if he hits. That's the big question mark that nobody has an answer to because he hasn't hit for the last 3 years. But he is going to make the opening day roster, just like I think Kenta Maeda is going to make the opening day roster. The Tigers are not going to eat $73 million for Javi Baez, just like I don't think they're going to eat $10 million for Kenta Maeda. So expect to see Javi Baez in games before the next podcast. And the big question is going to be, does he hit or does he not?
Oh, that's going to be a huge question. All right. Another week in the books. We're playing actual baseball. It was a lot of fun. And I'm really eager to get into the grind of the week where we play almost every day of the week. I hope Evan Petzold is having fun down there. His golf game's improving and he's getting nice and tan. Please like, rate, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and especially YouTube. You can always find us embedded within every single Evan Petzold article or wherever you listen to podcasts, as I said. I'd like to thank the editor of the Free Press, Nicole Avery Nichols, our producer, the magic man, Robin Chan, my amazing grandsons, the soon-to-be mommy, and hopefully soon to be coming to see her husband, Savannah Petzold. Until next week, peace.